A British charity that helps victims of forced marriage recommends hiding a spoon in your underwear if your family is forcing you fly back to your old country, so that you get a chance to talk to authorities after metal detector goes off. Have you or anyone else you know done this? How did it go? This is good advice, seriously. I have worked at an airport and have spoken to a security officer who helped a woman stop being transported and killed. The woman did not know she wasn't going to be coming home, until she got to the airport and her husband went to the toilet and she realized only he had a return ticket. She somehow managed to quickly think to hide her bangle so that she could set the metal detector off and have to be searched. As the officer was up close and searching her, the woman whispered, "Help me." The officer quickly took her for a private search, grabbed the woman's bags and passport too, as protocol, and went into the private search room. The woman fell on the floor crying, begging for help, so they called the police. The husband started to get suspicious and tried to break his way into the room, and the officer had to push against the door. Thankfully the police turned up straight away and restrained him. He was arrested and she was given protection and moved to a new city to start a new life. It was harrowing to hear, and really awful to know that this goes on. If you have any suspicion of something like this happening, even an inkling, please do something, call someone. A couple of weeks ago I read an article about a woman from Romania who was going to fly to Spain to work as bartender, but when she was at the airport she discovered she was going to be prostituted by a mafia. She wrote a "help me" note in a napkin she hid inside her passport, and at the control the Romanian police helped her and the procurers were arrested. It is the closer to that situation you ask. Link, in Spanish, sorry. Link. This one is serious. My friend is from Uzbekistan, and forced marriage is extremely popular over there. She was told of a partner at 14 and got married unwillingly to a farmer's son a year later. When he wanted to go on honeymoon to Rome, she took advice from friends who had heard about the spoon trick. Sure enough, after a week in Rome she put the spoon in her panties and was pulled over by authorities, where she confessed. She married another friend of mine in America, and she says she is happier than ever. The trick saved her from an unhappy life and marriage, so if you need to grab the spoon and put it near your junk. One of the coolest moments of my former law practice was getting a court to emancipate a young girl whose parents in her birth country had commanded her to return from a U.S. visit to marry a 55-year-old business pal of her dad's. In telephone testimony to the court, the father emphatically insisted that it was his right to give her to any man he chose and that her age and wishes were irrelevant. He also refused to let the child's mother testify despite being ordered by the judge to put her on. It took a little more than that to carry the day for us, but not much. Lots of lawyers in lots of cities around the world will vigorously pursue this kind of case at no charge. Just contact the local court or bar association, if that's at all possible. Edit 1 day later. I will be grateful if this story, which is in fact absolutely true, empowers even one person to seek or render help. This only works in the case if forced marriage involved transnational movement. And even then they can easily circumvent it by going by land if the distance is close enough. Problem is, or at least in my nation, most of these forced marriage happen within the nation, and almost exclusively in the Montegrads area, where the central government has no control over, and no desire to stir up the hornet's nest. They just go outright capture the bride, force her into marriage, and unless the bride manages to break out before they rape her, yes, rape. Or gang rape in many cases. She is screwed because once they rape her, she is viewed as belonging to them. That is why if you travel to northwest of Vietnam to Montegrad area you will see Hmong girls with knives. Those knives are used to stab these grooms. Edit. I forgot to add. Those knives are used to kill themselves if they cannot get away. We flight attendants are trained to spot human trafficking too. It's tough because handlers, scum, are getting smarter. Some brave girl left a note in the lavatory for us to find on a flight, and flight attendants were able to stop her from being trafficked further. Link. Edit. Since my thread has some attention, I do want to point out that you too can be on the lookout for human trafficking. If you see any of these signs listed on this government website, please let an airport authority know, or if in flight, let one of us flight attendants know. Do not engage the suspected people. We won't in flight either for the suspected person's safety. Link. Muslim woman. Here I've seen a lot people say, just write a note in your passport. First of all, it's usually the father carrying that daughter's passport and she probably never touched it. Pulling or talking to the authorities in front of your parents can be a very intimidating experience. In forced situations like these, you'd much rather be pulled in by authorities and given space to talk to them without your parents staring daggers at you. If you want to find people who did it or something similar, ex-Muslims is a great place for it, since I know quite a lot who had to escape abusive Muslim families and arrangements. I remember a lot of women posting their experiences or seeking help, a RL friend included. Most women will not try to escape or seek authority because that will mean the very real potential of an honor killing, something the authority might not be able to protect you from. A family that does forced marriage is more than likely to be willing to practice that or punish, beat you. Having to cut ties with parents and be forever shamed by them. This can take a real emotional toll on a Muslim woman, where they're told they can't go to heaven without parents' acceptance. What a lot of people don't understand is that a lot of these women can get up and leave, especially if they're in the West, but their values and ideologies and their love for parents can hold them back from seeking freedom. Also, the idea of being on your own and not having family. Anyways, I know a Muslim gay who escaped to the US and was actually beaten up by family members who traveled there just to beat him and drag him back. I know a friend who was forced to marry, and even when she did not want it, it was psychological. Her parents would tell her he's the best option she'll ever get, that she'll end up alone, that her uni major is useless and she's better off married. They really do try to bring the girl down so she can't fight, or even if she does, make her feel entrapped or that she has to do this or else that she would be useless or a shame to the family. I already promised you to him. I know not only Muslims practice this, but as far as I know, escaping a Muslim family is very hard and mentally draining, especially as a female, that most females will not attempt it. Edit, it's ex-Muslim, and thanks so much for the gold. Edit 2, I'm sorry if it seems like I'm attacking Islam, it just came from a very personal place and I'm not generalizing anyone. Obviously the majority of Muslims are not like that, but I won't say it's rare for these things to happen. I read about this as an anti-female genital mutilation technique. FGM is illegal in the UK. But some parents will take their pubescent girls home to meet their aunt for treatment in the African nations where they are from and where FGM is legal. I remember when I was young, like maybe 11/12, I was out with my mum and we bumped into her friend. When we got home, my mum told me that that woman had FGM, and that it was forced by her current spouse's family, otherwise they wouldn't allow the marriage. I remember thinking, why is she telling me about this woman's private bits? But now I realize my mum was making me aware of what can happen. My undergrad human sexuality professor in undergrad had an encyclopedic knowledge about FGM. Spent an entire class period talking about the different types, what they were for, how old the little girls were when they had adults they trusted hold them down and cut them up with dull and rusty knives, and how many girls died because of infection or because the person performing the operation cut something they shouldn't have. She told us a story about when she went to an African country on a humanitarian mission when she was still a practicing surgeon. She spent about a week treating cuts, stitching people up, administering vaccines. And then one day these women came up to her and asked her to come with them. They took her and a few other surgeons to this one-room building. It was filled with young girls, I can't remember the age range, but they were young. And these adult women asked these surgeons to perform the genital mutilation for them. And my professor was like, what do you do? Do you tell them no, knowing that it's going to happen anyway and some of these girls will die because the person doing it has no idea what they're doing? Or do you perform the procedure because at least you can make sure the girls are safe and healthy afterwards? She just let us sit with that for a few minutes. One of the most memorable class periods for me, because that gray area is just gut-wrenching. She told us she didn't do it, she couldn't. They went back to the village and made a phone call to try to get somebody to come out and dissuade the tribe from going through with it, but by the time they left no one had made it out yet. No clitoral stimulation, so sex isn't enjoyable for the girl. And ownership. It's really fucked up. It's really fucked up. They often remove more than just the clitoris. Often the girl's vaginal opening is stitched shut with just enough room to allow menstrual flow out. Guarantees a virgin bride. Puke forever. The gap isn't actually big enough to allow the normal menstrual flow out, which causes all sort of issues. I researched this as a uni project, it's completely fucked up. I remember we talking about this in one of my university classes and there were actually some kids arguing, well, it's their culture. How can you know what's right for someone else's culture? Fuck your culture. Culture is great so long as it isn't hurting anybody. Soon as that shit starts happening, fucking drag those bastards into the present and salt the earth as far as I'm concerned. It's the 21st century for fuck's sake. I took an African American lit class in college and the professor made us go watch an African documentary in an all-black section of the city. The viewers were a mix of locals interested in the film and the university students. After the film there was a discussion and one of the old local men asked why they did FGM, part of the film. When told that it was to reduce a woman's pleasure so that she was less likely to stray, that old fuck's whole face lighted up like it was the best idea he had heard in the last 20 years. Understatement edit. While I'm popular, go support a charity or something good you monkeys. That just blows my mind because like half the fun is your partner enjoying it too. I guess if you think of the person you're having sex with as your partner, you'd never advocate or tolerate FGM. Women are quite literally property, to be used and traded like livestock. It's even worse than that. Acknowledging that women have a value as a person is tantamount to not being a real man, being a homosexual to a lot of guys in Africa. Can't be a man if you respect women. Sadly, that view isn't limited to Africa. Nor is it limited to men for that matter. Some women can't stand the idea that someone is treated well if they themselves have been treated like shit. Homo humani lupus. Not if you don't care and if you actively distrust Gamal's edit. Leaving it. Fuck the sanitation. Female genital mutilation. They cut women's clitorises off. It makes sex agonous. I was going to add not only is sex no enjoyable, it typically becomes straight up painful. I'm security officer in airport, you don't have metal on you, activate the metal detector. As you're walking through the detector, bump or hit the side and it will cause it to activate. I'm sure gangs, traffickers and crap family will clock onto the spoon in underwear trick. I think there were multiple discussions about this on our legal advice along with other posts about people trying to avoid being sent away for marriage. I'll try to find them.